Good evening to all. I welcome you on behalf of Madras Tax Bar. Today we have amongst us Advocate Veera Raghavan sir from Sapa Law Associates. We'll be talking on faceless assessment, another very interesting new concept which is going to get momentum in the coming days. So I think this is again a very important topic. So we're looking forward to hearing from you, Veera Raghavan sir.
Not
Hello,
able to hear you. Prithvi?
Prithvi, we are not able to hear you, Prithvi. Got stuck in between.
Uh,
Can I start?
no, are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, I'm able to hear you now.
Sorry. So the entire presentation will be into 5 segments. So end of each segment, if there are any questions, you can ask. But then we'll only limit the questions in between to 5 minutes. If there are no questions at the end, also you can consolidate all the issues, and then we can ask the questions. How we will progress, however it seems to be convenient. So thank you once again to all for joining us, and we are looking forward in hearing from you, Veera Raghavan sir.
Thank you, Prithvi. Thank you. I'll just share my screen, the PPT that I have prepared for today's presentation. Yeah, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, could be it could be turned on to full screen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So I'll start. Uh,
Yes.
at the outset, I would like to thank the Madras Tax Bar and more particularly Mr. A.P. Srinivas for giving me an opportunity to present on a very important topic before such an august audience. It gives me a lot of learning as well. So moving on to the presentation, I would like to present today on the faceless assessment under the Income Tax Act that was introduced by the Government of India in September 2020. The faceless assessment, in my opinion, I think has made sweeping changes with the way in which the assessment under the Income Tax Act is actually being carried out. Now, over the course of my presentation, I would be focusing on two particular aspects. One is to explore the scheme of faceless assessment, to understand, to touch upon the basics of faceless assessment, and to mainly apprise ourselves about the procedure that has been evolved or enshrined in the faceless assessment scheme. After which, I will be presenting few of the issues that could actually be that could actually be subject to litigation in the future, in the form of what are the teething problems and what are the critical view that one can able to decipher. Now, under this section, I would be raising some important moot questions, which will be left to the audience to also answer and participate and discuss further. So, moving on, the faceless assessment scheme was introduced in September 2020 by uh, uh, by bringing into effect notification number 60 of 2020 and 61 of 2020. Now, the 60 of 2020 and 61 of 2020 actually made a lot of changes to the notification 61 of 2019. Now, what is this notification number 61 of 2019? 61 of 2019 was nothing but the e-assessment scheme that was introduced, wherein the entire assessment process was actually carried out through the income tax portal, trying to cut down on the physical interface between the assessing officer and the assessee. However, under the e-assessment scheme, largely the assessments were actually being carried out by the jurisdictional AO. But however, under the faceless assessment scheme, the government made a marked departure with the way they are handling the faceless assessment, wherein the assessment could be referred to any of the assessing officers sitting anywhere in the country. Now, between September 2020 and March 2021, the faceless assessment scheme was governed by the notification number 60 and 61 of 2020. However, with effect from 1/3/2021, government has introduced section 144B to the Income Tax Act. Government has introduced section 144B of the Income Tax Act, wherein they have nothing but reproduced whatever the procedure that was laid down in notification 60 of 2020 and 61 of 2020. Now, what is the scope of this faceless assessment scheme? Now, under the Income Tax Act, there are a lot of different kinds of assessment are technically carried out under the Income Tax Act. You could broadly divide the assessments into four. One is the scrutiny assessment, which is usually done under section 143(3) of the Income Tax Act. The second one is the best judgment assessment. The third one is reopening of assessment. And the fourth one, I would call it as the block assessment that is being carried out. Now, under the scrutiny assessment, right from issuance of notice, from end to end, right from issuance of notice till the passing of the assessing order, everything is done through the faceless assessment scheme. With respect to the best judgment assessment as well, when the assessee fails to respond to any of the notices that are issued, say for example, if he fails to respond to the notice under 142(1), where a pre-assessment hearing notice is actually, pre-assessment notice is actually included by, given by the Income Tax Department, but the assessee fails to respond to it, or under 148, when the assessee fails to respond, notices in such cases, the department carries over and they start doing what is called as a best judgment assessment, which means the assessing officer, to the best of his judgment, based on whatever material is available with him, carries out the best judgment assessment process. Now, reassessment. Now, reassessment or reopening of assessment is something that all of us are familiar with, because it has been one of the most litigated sections in the history of the Income Tax Act. Now, under the reassessment, once a notice is issued under 148, the notice is issued by the assessing officer, the jurisdictional assessing officer. Once a notice is issued and a response is actually given to that notice, afterwards, the entire scheme of the reassessment is carried over and it is given to the faceless assessment. So with respect to scrutiny assessment and best judgment assessment, it is end to end, which means the NFAC, which is the nodal authority, which is the National Faceless Assessment Scheme, carries out the assessment.
I'm sorry for interrupting, Viral.
Yeah.
I think your screen has freezed. We are not able to see any other
No,
slide.
I
Just
haven't.
the first
No, I
slide,
haven't got. I have gotten. I haven't gotten into it. I'll just get into it. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into the
Yes,
presentation.
I can hear you.
It's just an introduction that I'm.
All right, all right.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No
Sorry for
problem.
that.
Okay. So as I was saying, the reassessment, with respect to reassessment, the notice is issued by the jurisdictional officer, and then afterwards, once a response is received from the assessee, then the entire scheme gets transferred into the faceless assessment scheme. Now, this is the scope of the faceless assessment. Now, what are the objectives for which the faceless assessment scheme was actually introduced? The first objective is to reduce the physical interface between the assessing officer and the assessee. Now, if you eliminate the human interface between the assessing officer and the assessee, it saves a lot of time for both. The assessee need not physically go and visit the department for each and every issue, and it reduces a considerable amount of time and effort on the part of the assessee and the assessing officer as well. The second objective is to optimize resources through economies of scale and functional specialization. This technically means that the department, by using the technology that is available with it at its disposal, is able to reduce the cost that is involved in trying to collect the money or collect the tax for collect the revenue of the government through a very minimalistic approach. Economies of scale is nothing but when you try to increase a production by trying to marginalize your cost is what is called as economies of scale. So in the context of faceless assessment, economies of scale would be nothing but trying to reduce the expenses that is incurred or the administrative cost that is incurred for the purpose of collecting the revenue, at the same time ensuring there is no leakage of revenue. The third objective is to introduce the team-based determination for arm's length price with dynamic jurisdiction. So as I go, I'll be able to explain as to what this concept of dynamic jurisdiction is. So moving on to the next slide. What is the hierarchy that is involved? Who are the people, who are the institutions that are involved in this faceless assessment scheme process? First is the assessee who sits on the one end, and at the center lies the National Faceless Assessment Center. Now, under the aegis of National Faceless Assessment Center, there is this assessment unit, there is this verification unit, there is this technical unit, and at the end is the review unit. Now, the National Faceless Assessment Center acts as a pivot between the assessee and the four limbs that I have mentioned towards the right side of my screen. Now, the National Faceless Assessment is considered to be a nodal authority with respect to carrying out this faceless assessment. It has been entasked and it has been entrusted with the duty of carrying out this faceless assessment. The the assessment unit and the verification unit, the technical unit and the review unit essentially assist the national faceless assessment in trying to finalize a particular assessment. So this is the structure that is involved. As I said, the objective, the structure, and now let me get into the next slide, which explains the process behind the faceless assessment. Now, at the center lies the National Faceless Assessment Center. The assessee is on the one side. Under the faceless assessment scheme or under section 144B of the Income Tax Act with effect from 1/3/2021, the NFAC issues a notice to the assessee asking him to reply within a period of 15 days. The assessee should reply. The assessee is entitled. The assessee is bound to reply to the notice that is issued by the NFAC. Once this is issued, the National Faceless Assessment Center refers that particular case to an assessment unit in a regional assessment center. So under the income tax, once the National Faceless Assessment Center was established, there are also regional assessment centers that were established. Now, the NFAC will refer it or will assign that particular case to an assessment unit in a regional assessment center. Now, once the assessment unit receives the information from the National Faceless Assessment Center, which provides the information that it has obtained from the assessee, the assessment unit has, in case if the assessment unit feels that it requires further information, then in such cases, it shall refer the matter back to the National Faceless Assessment to garner further information from the assessee. So the NFAC will in turn intimate the same to the assessee. The assessment unit, as I said, might want certain information that is obtained from the assessee to also to be verified. So therefore, this is where the verification unit that I discussed the previous slide comes into the picture. So the verification unit under the aegis of the NFAC will verify this information that is submitted by the assessee upon intimation by the National Faceless Assessment Center. In addition to a verification unit, the act or the scheme has also constituted what is called as the technical assistance or the technical unit. So on matters of law, on matters of finance, on matters of economy, on matters of policy, if the assessment unit has got any doubts with respect to any of the issues, it can approach the NFAC and the NFAC will refer the matter to the technical unit. So the verification unit, as I said, and the technical unit will both prepare an elaborate report on the issues that were raised and placed before it, and it will send the report to the National Faceless Assessment Center. Now, once the National Faceless Assessment Center receives the report, that report will be forwarded to the assessment unit. Now, we have reached the stage where the assessment unit has got every material within its ambit for the purpose of carrying out the assessment. It has got the factual information from the assessee. It has got the verification unit, the details that has been verified by the verification unit, and it has also got the technical assistance from the technical unit. Now, what does this assessment unit? What will the assessment unit do now? The assessment unit now will pass what is called as a draft assessment order. It passes what is called as a draft assessment order, which means essentially it will adjudicate the issues that have been raised, the issues that it wants to adjudicate, and it will pass a draft assessment order. Once a draft assessment order is passed, the draft assessment order is communicated to the National Faceless Assessment Center. So as I said in the beginning, the NFAC is considered to be the pivot, and the major burden or the major workload under the faceless assessment scheme would squarely fall only on the shoulders of the NFAC. So now the draft assessment order is communicated to the NFAC. Now, what does the NFAC do now? The scheme of the act says the National Faceless Assessment Center, based on the risk management strategy that is evolved by the board. So the provision uses the term the risk management strategy. Based on the risk management strategy evolved by the board, does three things. Now, what are the three things that the NFAC does? First, once it receives the draft assessment report, it finalizes the assessment. In case no variation is proposed prejudicial to the interest of the assessee, it finalizes the assessment and sends a copy of that finalized draft assessment order as a final assessment order to the assessee. Second, if there are any variations that are proposed and such variations are against or detrimental to the interest of the assessee, then the draft assessment order is forwarded by the NFAC to the assessee to show cause against such variations. These variations can be in the nature of when the AU does not accept whatever the return of income is being filed by the assessee, and it has raised important issues, and it feels that there has to be certain variations. It gets translated into the draft assessment order, and the copy of the draft assessment order goes to the assessee through the NFAC. The third most important thing is what is called as the introduction of the review unit. Now, the NFAC is within its discretion as per the scheme that is established, and as well as per the section 144B of the Income Tax Act, it may refer the matter to what is called as the review unit. Now, what does this review unit do? Now, the review unit has got a copy of the draft assessment order. Now, once it receives the draft assessment order, it has two options: either to concur with whatever is being stated in the draft assessment order, or make any suggestions to change whatever has been observed in the draft assessment order. So once it concurs with any of the changes that is specified in the draft assessment order, it forwards the same to the NFAC. Now the NFAC will again follow the procedure that I explained right now, wherein if there are any variations not detrimental to the interest of the assessee, then it will be finalized and a final assessment order will be passed. However, if there are still any variation, it will again be forwarded to the assessee to show cause against such variations that have been proposed. Now, the review unit, if it concurs, the NFAC will follow the procedure as I told now. But if the review unit says that it doesn't agree with the draft assessment order and makes some suggestions to change the draft assessment order, then what will be the case? Now it will be sent by the NFAC, and the NFAC will again forward that draft assessment order along with the report of the review unit to another assessment unit. Now, this assessment unit is not the original assessment unit that I told in the beginning. So this will be an entirely different assessment unit. Now, once the second assessment unit receives the draft assessment order with the changes suggested by the review unit, then in such cases, the other assessment unit passes what is called as the final draft assessment order. So the final draft assessment order goes to NFAC. The NFAC will again look into it, and it will follow the procedure that it has prescribed. It will follow the procedure where, in case there are no variations which are proposed, again detrimental to the interest of the assessee, it will finalize the assessment order. In case if there are variations, it will be sent to the assessee. Now the assessee has to show cause, and assessee has to give his or her reply within the time that is specified in the final draft assessment order. Once the reply is received from the assessee for the final draft assessment order, the NFAC will forward the same to the assessment unit. And this is how the entire process takes place. So to summarize the process that I have told right now, the NFAC sits at the center. The NFAC is considered to be the pivot. It is considered to be the nodal authority. It coordinates between its various limbs on one side, which is namely the assessment unit, the review unit, and also the verification unit, the technical unit, and that of the assessee. Moving on, the first issue that I would like to raise before this honorable forum is the powers of the NFAC. Whether the powers are too wide that it could actually lead to an arbitrary use of power would be my first question. I'll tell you the reason. Because, as I explained, once a draft assessment order is passed under the scheme or under the act by the assessment unit, the draft assessment order gets communicated to the National Faceless Assessment Center. Now the NFAC, subject to the risk management strategy that is specified by the board, will do any of the three things that I explained to you. However, there is neither a circular nor a notification that actually says what is this risk management strategy that is actually specified by the board and what will be followed by the NFAC. So basically, if NFAC arrives at any of the decision that is specified therein, no taxpayer or assessee will have an opportunity to know as to the premise of the said decision. If I am not wrong, I would like to equate this risk management strategy scenario to the words of the Income Tax Act that was there in section 148, wherein it said that if the assessing officer has reasons to believe. So those words were interpreted by the courts all over the country saying that in such cases where the term reasons to believe are being used, then the assessing officer is duty bound to disclose those reasons to the assessee for him to show cause as to what are the reasons under which his assessment has been selected for scrutiny. So this is the first issue that I would like to raise as to whether the NFAC, being a statutory authority, is duty bound to disclose the risk management strategy so as to have some sort of a transparency in carrying out its function. The next issue, as I told, between September 2020 to February 2021, it was notification 60 of 2020 that was invoked, and it was governing the process by which the faceless assessment was taking place. Now, as I said, prior to February 2021, when the amendment was actually happening, the words that were used in para 16 were NFAC to final. Once the draft assessment order is received by the NFAC, subject to the risk management strategy that is specified by the board, will finalize the assessment. It did not use the word if no variations prejudicial to the interest of the assessee is proposed. This was the original language that was there in notification before the amendment actually took place in Feb 2021. So para 16 A, B, C. A says that NFSC, after receipt of its draft assessment order, will finalize the assessment and issue a notice of penalty or demand, if any, to the assessee. The next, it spoke about in subpara B, it spoke about provide an opportunity if any modification is proposed, which means the NFAC will provide an opportunity to the assessee if any modification is proposed. However, who proposes this modification is not something that was actually expressly stated in the act. And the third one will be or assigned to the review unit. So there was a marked departure until February 2021 when the CBDT issued a circular notification number 6 of 2021, wherein they changed the language that was ingrained in the notification. The language, as I said, was changed to NFAC to finalize as per DAO if no variation prejudicial to the interest of the assessee is proposed, or it will show cause the assessee if any variation prejudicial to interest of the assessee is proposed, or it might refer to the review unit. Now, from 1/3/2021, it is section 144B that actually comes into the picture. The language that was ingrained in section 144B is nothing but a language that has been reproduced from the notification number 6 of 2021. Now here, with effect from February, one more issue that I would like to raise before this honorable forum is that the assessee will be the NFAC will show cause the assessee if any variation prejudicial to the interest of the assessee is proposed. However, the term variation prejudicial to interest is not something that has been defined. So what is the level, what is the degree with which the NFAC will exercise its discretion? If one says that it will be in accordance with the risk management strategy that is specified by the board, the risk management strategy is also something which has not been disclosed or notified to the public. So what is the basis under which the NFAC will actually come to a conclusion? This is the second question that I would like to raise. The third question is, under what premise the NFAC will actually refer the draft assessment order to a review unit? So there are totally three questions that I would like to raise before this honorable forum. Is that what is the risk management strategy? Whether there is any transparency with respect to the risk management strategy. The second question is, what is the level or what is the degree to which the NFAC can decide that something is against or prejudicial to the interest of the assessee? And the third question that I would like to raise is, under what circumstances the NFAC can actually refer the draft assessment order to the review unit? So these are the three principal questions that I would like to raise at this stage.
On these 3 points, if anyone wants to quickly add on or give their views, we have 2 to 3 minutes time.
Yeah, Prithvi, Satish here.
Yes, sir.
So one of the canons of taxation is certainty, correct?
Yes, sir.
Certainty in taxation. Where is the question of certainty here?
Yes, sir.
Is there any certainty in what?
Can you remove that share, please?
Yes,
Screen
sir.
share. Can you remove that? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So, certainty in taxation is a hallmark
Yes,
of
sir.
jurisprudence, taxation jurisprudence.
Yes, sir.
But from what you are now trying to say, There seems to be more uncertainty than certainty.
Yes, sir. In the subsequent slides, I'll be able to demonstrate as to I'll be able to demonstrate the arbitrariness of NFAC and how the courts have actually intervened within a very short span of time.
Yeah. So I expected that to come. Oh my
Yes,
God.
sir.
Thanks.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
That's what I also wanted to say. Within a short span in time, a number of issues of the faceless assessment have already reached the high courts.
Yes, sir.
In various matters. The same, there was an experiment with transfer pricing with respect to international tax some years back with the introduction of that
DRP.
dispute resolution panel, ARP. It was an utter failure because it was completely skewed in the side of the department and the assessees were not able to obtain any kind of a relief. That even when, explaining the matters to them, even after having a face-to-face interaction with the authorities, there was actually, hitting the wall rather than having any kind of a resolving in any of the matters. Almost, most of the matters in DRP were the confirmation of the department's finding. So in the faceless assessments also, I think it is, I'm not sure, all the officers should be able to read all the submissions, which doesn't happen first of all. The first and foremost thing, on a face-to-face situation, we can at least explain the concepts to them, at least in a nutshell, at least in trying to say in this page number, in this place we have done, etc. But in the faceless assessments, it is expected that the officers will actually go through all the submissions in full and come to a conclusion, which I have my own apprehensions with respect to that. I think the speaker will also deal with it.
Yes, sir.
So far, I think that's it.
Prithvi, I have to add one more.
Yes, sir.
I'm Ravindran.
Yes, sir.
This faceless assessment, I think it also creates some kind of powerless or assertion of executive authority in the minds of the officers. Officers are not able to understand the information that is passed on to them or the credentials of that, and therefore just to avoid any risk from their side, they always try to err on the revenue side. Therefore, it creates a lot of complex issues to the assessee. Therefore, it is a problem that will definitely create, and more solutions are required in the faceless assessment. That is how I look at it.
Right. We can proceed on to the next point. Yes.
You just asked two issues. One is that the prejudicial to the interest of the assessee.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
There is going to be a variation. Definitely, opportunity should be given to the assessee. What
Yes,
is the
sir.
problem in that?
Yes, sir. But prior to that, the NFAC says, based on the risk management strategy specified by the board, and through an order.
Let me also ask that one. What is the risk management? You don't have a chance of what is reason to believe. You want something to be defined by the board that what is risk management risk? Do you need to say that you want a definition of what is risk management factor or something like that?
I understand your point, sir, but the problem that I am trying to point out here is the 3 points that I mentioned in the 3 paragraphs in para 16A, B, and C. Everything is subject to the risk management strategy that is specified by the board. So, for what a 10,000 demand for someone is not the same demand for someone else also. Suppose if I'm a pretty lucrative taxpayer, I might be able to pay a sum of rupees 10,000 rupees. What if the board tomorrow arbitrarily decides in its risk management strategy that someone A has filed a set return of income, he has been consistently filing a return of income, he is paying some amount of money as tax. So therefore 10,000 is not something that I would want to collect and go behind him and waste my resources. And therefore I'll forego on that. But it could be different for someone else also. So those things have to be necessarily defined for us to understand.
Do you mean to say that the policy of the government has to be designed to this one? They may charge, they may not charge, they may take a scrutiny, they may not take a scrutiny. So, but that cannot be defined by the government or anything. Is my whether I'm right or wrong, just to be decided. But
Understood.
with reference to the interest of the assessee, anything if it is prejudicial to the interest of the revenue, assessee, opportunity should be given, even if it is 1 rupee or something like that of tax collection, it has to be given.
Yes, sir. But the problem is prior to February, from September 2020 to February, that wasn't there also.
Yes,
So
yes.
whatever faceless assessment was being picked up between that period and still pending might face the same problem, which is why I'm trying to bring to your attention certain case laws.
Right.
Thank you. Thank
Right.
you.
So I think we could actually move ahead with the presentation. And I think there'll be a lot of some few debatable points on this, where
Yes,
it
sir.
will be quite interesting to listen to the other aspect of things also. And we have all our senior counsels from the department also. So even they can help us in understanding.
Prithvi, can I just ask one question before you continue?
So yes, sir, one last question, because we'll move on to the next issue, and then we can consolidate at the end and have a proper talk on all these points.
Just to continue where Mr. Swaminathan left off,
Yes, sir.
can Mr. Swaminathan please tell me under the statute where this word risk management comes and what is the sanctity of risk management?
Not defined.
Swaminathan, sir,
Not defined.
not defined. Therefore, it is illegal.
No, sir, it's not a question. No, see, risk management is for the benefit of the department.
Sir,
Some parameters are prescribed.
I'm only asking where is the legal sanctity provided for under the Act for risk management?
So why it's automatic? There is no
one minute,
question
sir.
of legal sanctity or not, sir.
APS, sir, 1 minute.
No,
1 minute.
Anand, sir.
It may be for the convenience of the functioning of the officers.
No,
But
sir,
does it have the sanctity of
at
law
all.
as a
Convenience
question?
of the assessee, sorry, convenience of the assessees only. See, not all the assessments will be touched. Only where there is risk parameters, that alone scrutinize. Otherwise, now we are in self-written era. We accept the self-assessment in all under the all the acts. So only when risk parameters involved, some parameters are set up by given by the board as instructions. So
But
only
where are they
those
provided? Where are they provided for under the Act?
So it is there in the notification. That's what Swaminathan. So it need not to be under the Act, sir. It's very convenient to the assessee. We accept the self-assessment. Then what is the way to take the assessment for scrutiny? It is part of the department exercise. So within some parameters only they can scrutinize. See, it's like police is does they inspect everybody going on the road? Only they suspect. So some guidelines are included in the risk management system. That's all. So it is in the
before we
display 144B for a minute.
now
For the benefit of everyone.
everything.
144B.
Sir, I would just request. I would just make a small request before. Sorry, I'm extremely sorry. Risk management. I suggest that we can have the talk at the end of the session, because he still has 4 more parts of the presentation. So,
Fair enough. Agreed.
Veera Raghavan, we can actually we can move ahead with the presentation, and all these questions can be taken up at the end, until or unless there is something very immediately which is to be answered in your mood questions. Those can be taken up only to that limited extent. But we will definitely have the discussion on the risk management issue at the end.
Sure.
Thank you, and sorry for interrupting.
Shall I respond to Krishnanand or at the end?
Sir, at the end, sir.
Okay.
Vishwanathan, sir, sorry. At the end, we will take it, sir. We're already 10-15 minutes gone in this. We will finish it off and then.
Are you able to see my screen?
Certainly.
Are you able to see?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Veera Raghavan, I am able to see your screen. We can proceed. Yeah.
So as it was. 1 minute. So as it was mentioned by one of our members, I think execution of the arbitrary power has already begun, and there were repeatedly there have been a plethora of cases. I have picked 3 cases to demonstrate that there is some sort of an uncertainty with which the NFAC is operating, trying to conclude the assessment. So the first case that I would have picked is the case of Lokesh Construction was Assistant Commissioner of Income Tax. The material facts of the case is that there were variations that were proposed against the assessee, but the draft assessment order was not something that was communicated to the assessee, which actually led the NFAC to issue a final assessment order before communicating to the assessee. So this led to a huge, this led the assessee aggrieved whereby thereafter he approached the Honorable High Court of Delhi for a writ, which ultimately quashed the order and remanded back to the AO for fresh consideration. The next case is the case before the Delhi High Court in the case of YCD Industries versus Assistant Commissioner of Income Tax, where again the NFAC failed to issue the draft assessment order despite variations being proposed against the assessee. So it met a similar fate as the previous case, wherein the Delhi High Court had to quash the order and remand back the matter back to the AO for fresh consideration. Next case is the case before the Madras High Court in the case of Mr. Ekambaram Srinivasan. This particular case, usually the draft assessment order will have a time within which the assessee has to respond with its objections. So only if the assessee fails to respond within its objections, then the NFAC will finalize the assessment. However, in the instant case, the final order was passed before the time that was granted in the draft assessment order lapsed. So this led to the intervention of the Honorable High Court of Madras, which quashed the order and remanded again the matter back to the AO for fresh consideration. So I have just picked out three cases which I think is relevant to this particular this thing. There are, of course, a lot of other cases which is there wherein the High Court had to repeatedly intervene. Now, moving on to my next issue is the issue of personal hearing. Now, I would like, before I get into the aspects of personal hearing under the National Faceless Assessment Scheme, I would like to place before this forum two important scenarios based on which I'll raise my legal issue. The first issue is the decision by the Supreme Court in the case of Rajesh Kumar versus Union of India. In this particular case, the assessee, who was an individual, was directed by the assessing officer under section 142(2)(a) of the Income Tax Act to get his accounts audited by a qualified chartered accountant. However, before issuing the directions, the assessing officer had not provided an opportunity to the assessee. It wasn't mandated in the act as well. So the assessee approached the Honorable Supreme Court, and ultimately the Supreme Court, relying on its earlier decisions, held that if any statutory authority passes an order that gives rise to any civil consequences to the assessee, then it is mandatory that a personal hearing ought to be given, even when the provisions of the act are silent. What had happened was, subsequently there were a lot of disputes pertaining to 142(2)(a), and the government of that day, through an amendment in 2006, brought in a proviso that says that before issuing any direction under 142(2)(a), personal hearing or an opportunity of being heard ought to be given to the assessee. So this is the first scenario that I would like to mention. The summary of this is, even if the statute is silent on the aspect of giving a personal hearing, but the statutory authority passes an order that leads to any civil consequences to the assessee, it is duty bound on the officer to give an opportunity for personal hearing. The next scenario is the scenario that I have tried to compare and draw a parallel with under the TN-VAT Act. Now, under the TN-VAT Act, there are provisions pertaining that deals with or that governs assessment. For example, under section 22(4), the commercial tax officer, who is otherwise the assessing officer under the TN-VAT Act, can conclude a assessment based on his best judgment if he finds that the returns that have been filed by the assessee is incorrect or wrong. In such cases, before passing an order, then it is imperative that the officer ought to give an opportunity of being heard. So the proviso uses the term opportunity of being heard. Whereas under section 27, wherein the officer is empowered to reopen an assessment if there is escapement of turnover, the proviso says before going ahead and deciding something under 27, the assessee has to be given a reasonable opportunity to show cause. So there was a marked difference with the language of the statute, whereas under 22(4) it said that there should be a reasonable opportunity of being heard. Under 27 it said that there has to be a reasonable opportunity to show cause. Now this obviously created an ambiguity, and therefore the commercial tax officers, thinking that only a show cause notice has to be issued a show cause notice, received assessee's objections, and started deciding the cases only based on the objections without giving an opportunity for personal hearing. So this naturally led to a dispute, and therefore the assessees had to approach the Honorable High Court under Article 226 of the Constitution. So Under 226, the Madras High Court, the Honorable Madras High Court, in a plethora of cases, be it under 22 or 27, have clearly laid down that irrespective of whether the assessee seeks an opportunity of being heard or not, it is mandatory for the government or the commercial tax officer to provide an opportunity for personal hearing. Now, the government of that day had also introduced a circular, namely Circular number 7 of 2014, clarifying that it is necessary to give an opportunity for personal hearing, even if it's not opted by the assessee. Now, these are the two scenarios. The first scenario is when the statute is absolutely silent in trying to give an opportunity for personal hearing, or when the statute is ambiguous in trying to give an opportunity for the personal hearing. It is a settled legal position that personal hearing ought to be given, mandatorily given in every such circumstances. Now, what is the situation under the faceless assessment scheme? Under the faceless assessment scheme, para 11 or section 144 deals with PH. Now, what does it say? Now, as I explained in the previous slide, once the draft assessment order is issued by the assessment unit to the NFAC will receive the draft assessment order. After it receives the draft assessment order, if it finds that there are variations that are prejudicial against the interest of the assessee is proposed, it will forward such draft assessment order to the assessee and tell the assessee to show cause. Now, the Act clearly says only if the assessee seeks an opportunity or requests for an opportunity for personal hearing, it will be mandatory for the NFAC to give such opportunity. So this is the first condition. The first condition is that the assessee has to request for an opportunity for personal hearing in the objection that he files before the NFAC. The second thing is, it is not given that the assessee will immediately or automatically get an opportunity. So the Chief Commissioner or the Director General of that relevant REAC may approve the request for PH only if the request that is being sought by the assessee falls under the circumstances that are specified by the board. Has the board specified such circumstances? Yes, it has been specified. Under the circular which has been issued under the nomenclature standard operating procedure, the circular clearly says that an opportunity for personal hearing will be granted if and only if there are any disputes with respect to facts underlying any of the modifications that are being proposed. So there are three conditions that are imposed for getting an opportunity for personal hearing. The first is that the assessee has to request an opportunity. The second is that such request has to fall within the circumstances that are specified by the board. And the circumstances that are specified by the board clearly says that only if there is any dispute with respect to the fact underlying that modifications that is proposed, then a PH has to be given. Now, in the above context, now in trying to come, in the light of the scenarios that I mentioned in my previous slide, I would like to place this before this forum to elicit their views on whether such conditions that are imposed in this faceless assessment scheme and in section 144B will actually see the light of the day, considering how the courts have repeatedly given relief by providing or directing the officers to provide an opportunity for personal hearing. I leave it to you, Prithvi.
Right. I think even this point would require some elaborate discussion. We can give 2 minutes if anyone wants to. Yes,
just one, even if an opportunity of personal hearing is given, it should be an effective one, right?
Yes, sir.
I should be able to produce, the assessee should be able to produce materials in the
sir.
course of the personal hearing to justify his stand in the matter.
Sir, actually, to add on to your point, the circular also says that the opportunity shall be given through a video conferencing, and the video conferencing will last only for 30 minutes. And only if it is requested by the assessee, it can be extended beyond 30 minutes. So there are strictures that are there in the circular that purely limits.
So that itself looks like it's very arbitrary.
Yes, sir.
I want to only add on 3 points here. Once you say communication of the draft order means some pre-conclusion has been reached.
Yes, sir. I am coming to that issue, sir, subsequently, sir.
Oh, okay. You have not spoken on that yet.
Yes, sir. I'll come to that subsequently, sir.
All right. Coming to PH, personal hearing. According to you, only facts are disputed personal hearing.
Yes,
so
sir.
you will not have any opportunity to change the mind of the authorities on question of law.
Correct, sir.
What they hold as law is the law. It is
Yes,
very
sir.
arbitrary according to me.
You have only remedy by way of an appeal, sir, in case an order is passed.
This is draconian. The very purpose of the principles of natural justice is gone. On that ground itself, the system cannot work according to.
Not only that, the appeal is also faceless, and now the tribunal is also faceless. So as soon as we file the return, we have to file a writ. Writ and return. Return and writ will go side by side.
So you got a lot of opportunity now.
It's sad.
The doubt I have is who will be the respondents?
That also I wanted to ask. What is the juristic status of this National Faceless Assessment Center? What is the juristic status of that particular body?
All the orders are being issued only through the National Faceless Assessment Center.
But what is that authority? Who is he? What is the status? Who are all the composing members of that? We don't know anything. One computer is there, some officers are manning. And you are sending this assessment to different assessing officers.
Will be the respondent, I guess. If it is an assessment, the respective jurisdictional officers, isn't it not?
Sir, it will only be the NFAC, sir. So if you actually see the
he would not have participated at all. The local assessing officer would not have taken part at all. Where the question of making him respondent. And one more thing, when a draft assessment order comes, according to our friend, it will be referred to some other assessment order. So there is a collective people involved in this assessment against one assessee.
There is no ownership for the order at all from the department side. Yes, maybe.
Sir, if may I add points, as per the appeal mechanism, it says that for the purposes of appeal, as if the jurisdiction officer has passed the order, the appeal will be lying before the jurisdiction commissionerate. So under such an understanding, we should emphasize that jurisdiction officer would be the respondent also for the purpose of filing a writ. Otherwise, it will mean that all of us would have to file a writ under the Delhi jurisdiction only, because NFAC is constituted in Delhi.
So there will be 3 respondents, no?
Minimum.
I think to be on the safe side, we have to add everybody, including the president of the IRS in this case.
Including Madras Tax Bar. And then, sir, I saw a few orders. Same judgment by Vikas Singh is passing orders. I don't know why, only in Madras. Who is this Vikas Singh? Nobody knows. A draft order. Then the final somewhere, somebody else comes with no, only initials is there, but we don't know the name.
Completely anonymous, sir.
So most likely in Delhi, you'll get some Ramaswamy Iyer or somebody.
I request you to continue so that we can keep all this at the end.
Sure, sir.
Right. You can continue, Viral.
Yes, sir. So this is the issues with respect to the issue of personal hearing. One of the glaring issues that has come up in the NFAC, which will be subject to a lot of litigation. 1 minute. There's also another case law that I would like to bring to your attention. This is also before the Delhi High Court in the case of Sanjay Agarwal, where the NFAC failed to provide an opportunity for appeals despite assessee seeking the same. So this is also another case where the Delhi High Court had to intervene, quash the order, and remand the matter back to the assessing officer for fresh consideration. Now, the next issue that I would like to bring about is a very interesting issue, and what is called as the doctrine of dictation. So as tax practitioners, we would be aware, especially practitioners who have been involved in practicing the indirect tax, especially under the TN-VAT. Now, what usually happens under the TN-VAT Act is, if there is an enforcement audit that is actually conducted in the premises of a dealer, the enforcement audit would issue a notice, and it would forward a report based on the issues that it has raised, and it will forward the report to the local jurisdictional commercial tax officer. Now, in most cases, the commercial tax officer would per se reproduce whatever is being there in the enforcement audit report and will pass orders accordingly. So therefore, when the matter was agitated before the Honorable Madras High Court, the High Court had intervened and had told that the assessing office, the commercial tax officer, has got an independent frame of mind, and therefore he'll be eligible to decide dispute on its own. Now, under the faceless assessment scheme, I would like to bring to your attention one of the important notifications that was notified with effect from 31/3/2021, namely notification number 22 of 2021. Now, under this notification was passed in excess of the powers that was conferred under Section 120 of the Income Tax Act. Now, what does this notification say? The notification clearly says that whichever officer who has been involved, the personnel who has been involved in trying to man the National Faceless Assessment Center will be construed as an assessing authority. So they have been given the powers that is conferred on the assessing authority, and therefore they have the powers to adjudicate as well. So in addition to the administrative work that they have been doing in trying to coordinate between the assessee and the various limbs, namely the assessment unit, verification unit, and the technical unit, by virtue of this notification under 22 of 2021, they are also construed or deemed to be an assessing officer. Now, what does the NFAC do when it comes to finalizing the assessment? Now, as I was explaining the procedure, once a draft assessment order is passed, the draft assessment order goes to the NFAC. Now, the provisions or para 16 clearly says it can do either of the three things. It can finalize the assessment if there is no variation prejudicial to the interest of the assessee is proposed, which means the NFAC will pass an order, will pass a final assessment order, which will be an appealable order. So it is only against the order that has been passed by the NFAC that will become appealable, or it can be subject to writ jurisdiction if a writ can be invoked on such and such grounds. Now, here the NFAC is finalizing an order without any application of mine, as the commercial tax officer has been doing. So it's merely going by the observations that are being made by in the draft assessment order or the final draft assessment order that is forwarded to it by the other assessment unit. So here is a case where the NFAC is nothing but acting under a dictation from the assessment unit. Now, the case that I have referred to is the case of Rajat Leasing and Finance Limited versus Assistant Commissioner of Income Tax, where the assessment was reopened, and the reasons, and looking at the notice for reopening the assessment, it was found that the assessment was reopened only based on the objections that have been given by the revenue department or an officer who was superior to the officer or the assessing officer who issued such notice. The Gujarat High Court clearly said that the assessing officer has got a very independent frame of mind, and therefore he has to analyze and see whether there would lie any grounds for reopening of such assessment. Now, in light of the scenario that I have mentioned with respect to TNVAT Act, where the High Court has repeatedly said that the commercial tax officer has to exercise his independent frame of mind and not act based on the dictation of the officers who are involved in this enforcement audit, and the case of Rajat Leasing, my question before this forum is that the NFAC is per se, according to me, doing the same thing. By finalizing the assessment based on the draft assessment order, they are only acting merely on the directions of the assessment unit, which is nothing but a violation of doctrine of dictation.
Yes, I think this point also will have the same type of discussion which was there for the previous. If there's any additional point to this, you can come forward, or else we'll continue with the session and we can have the discussion at the end.
See, I have a query here. This doctrine of dictation would apply in instances where the parties are at par with each other. Like, for example, you had explained this scenario under TNVAT Act. Do we know the constitution of what NFAC would actually be, or the assessment unit would actually be, in order to equate them in the same parlance and conclude that, there would be a doctrine of dictation applicable here?
See, irrespective of what is the constitution of the NFAC and what are the designation that is there within the NFAC, a draft assessment order is being passed by one authority, and it is finalized only based on the draft assessment order by another authority. So it's basically one is acting under the dictation of the other.
So you're saying there will not be much application of mind on behalf of the NFAC itself because they're already having a preconceived order with them.
Yeah, correct.
Right, okay.
Okay, we can move on to the next.
Will you not face the same thing in transfer pricing?
Sir?
Will you not face the same thing in transfer pricing? We are facing, actually, we are facing the same situation in dispute resolution panel, where where
Yeah.
the panel has blindly accepted only what the assessment officer says. In fact, due to various reasons, the logical facts or the logical arguments of the assessees are given a go by. And all these issues are only settled by the tribunal. That's the sorry state of affairs, where the same authority within the same institution is trying to check the work of another. Due to various reasons, what happens that the other authorities' decision is blindly followed for various reasons.
Sir, under if I may answer your question, under the transfer pricing assessment, at least there can be a certain level of justification wherein, since the transfer pricing is a subject matter that has to be dealt with by the experts, and the DRP is actually constituted for the purpose of dealing with, matters of expertise. In such cases, the assessing officer would not be someone who will be handicapped by this. But under the faceless assessment scheme, the same issues that are there before the assessment unit is the same issue that is there before the NFAC as well. So the NFAC is nothing but it toes the line of the assessment unit when it comes to finalizing the assessment.
I thought the provision is this way. NFAC is only assisted by the assessment unit. If
Yes,
that
sir.
is the case, can you say they simply draw the line or follow whatever the assessment unit says? They take assistance. Eventually, it is who owns the order. Ramana asked whether anybody owns the order. It is National E-Assessment Center that owns the assessment order. Why do you say nobody owns that? There is somebody who owns it. One. And the assessment unit simply assists. You cannot say the E-Assessment Center simply blindly follows assessment unit. The assessment unit facilitates the point. That's what the law provides for. Third thing, coming to Ramana's point, 1 minute, Ramana. The third thing, coming to Ramana's point on dispute resolution panel, it is not fault of law. At best, it could be fault of execution. If 3 commissioners simply confirm all the orders of all the draft assessment orders before them, it is not fault of law. The officers probably failed to function the way in which the law requires them to function. And I don't think that is a comparable situation here.
To add on to what Balaji said, instead of looking at it as a draft order, imagine if it is a show cause notice. Anybody can trigger a show cause notice. So what if somebody gives a show cause notice and somebody considers that order? Why don't you equate it to a show cause notice? Why do you take it as an order?
Sir, it is not different person, sir. It is same person.
Is
Who
there
issues,
any
1 minute,
situation up till
1
now?
minute, Ramana, 1 minute, Ramana. Who issues if Veer Raghavan can clarify, who
Yes, sir.
issues show cause notice, sir, here?
No show cause.
There is no
Only
show
draft
cause, sir.
order.
Only draft assessment order is issued.
No. If there is a variation,
Yes, sir.
along with the draft assessment order, the show cause is also
No,
required to be.
the draft assessment order will contain a line whereby it says that the assessee has to reply to by way of an objections to the draft assessment.
No.
The assessee has to show cause.
So there is a show cause.
Yeah, the draft assessment order will contain a line in the end saying that the assessee has to show cause against the variations that have been proposed against the assessee.
Why these draft assessment order should
1 minute,
not be
sir.
finalized?
Sir,
That
sir,
will
1
be the
minute.
question.
Listen, sir, 1 minute. Who issues that?
It is issued by the NFAC, sir, to the assessee.
NFAC.
It comes
So
from
who
the
finally-
assessment unit. Sir,
Who
it
makes
comes
the
from the
assessment?
it comes
Who
from
makes
the
the assessment?
Yes, sir. It comes from the assessment unit, and then it goes to the NFAC, and then the NFAC issues it to the assessee.
No. As regards the assessee, as far as the assessee is concerned, the assessee is interacting only with the National E-Assessment.
NFAC.
National faceless assessments. Yes.
Faceless, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Faceless Assessment Center.
Yes, sir.
So the notice, draft assessment, everything comes only from one authority. It is
Yes,
not
sir.
different authorities as regards yes.
Yes, sir. But the personal hearing happens before the assessment unit, sir. That is where the confusion lies, which I'll be dealing it with in the next issue, sir.
That's fine. That's a different issue.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Right. We can move on to the next
Veeraraghavan, Prithvi, can I just add a point?
Yes, sir.
Veeraraghavan, with in this regard, what sir has been saying on this, the empowerment of National Faceless Assessment Center.
Yeah.
The scheme provides that the draft assessment order, on receipt of draft assessment order, the National Faceless Assessment Center will examine whether there is a modification or whether it requires a review. Therefore, the National Faceless Assessment Center does not act as if like an
No.
intermediary. It,
No, no.
itself is consists of
No.
officers.
No, when you look at para 16, it clearly says that on the receipt of the draft assessment order, the NFAC will finalize the assessment based on the risk management strategy if there are no variations that are proposed prejudicial to the interest of the assessee.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So National Faceless Assessment Center is not only just an interface. It is consisting of an officer who has been empowered with various.
To the extent of the language, that is being used in the Act, I don't think the NFAC exercises any sort of an adjudicatory power, but only
It is
goes
not.
by.
Yes, but it is exercising the review power, review or examination power, wherein he checks and balances the draft assessment orders.
Only to
Whether
the
one has
extent,
to.
only to the extent to identify whether there are any variations, not beyond that.
Yes.
Right. You can continue, Virag. I think we are going to have an interesting after session.
Yeah,
of
yeah.
this. Yeah.
One minute. Some problem with the system. Just a minute.
No issues.
The next issue that I would like to bring before this forum is the issue of one person hears, another person decides. So as I said,
I'm sorry again. You're not sharing a screen.
I'm not sharing it, is it? 1 minute, sorry. Are you able to see my screen now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So the next issue that I would like to bring before this forum is the issue of one person hearing and another person deciding, which in itself in principle is against the principle of fair hearing. Now, as I was explaining the procedure, once a draft assessment order is passed and any variation is proposed in the draft assessment order that is prejudicial to the interest of the assessee, then the NFAC communicates the draft assessment order to the assessee. The assessee has to file his objections based on the draft assessment order, and only if the assessee requests for an opportunity for personal hearing, and if such request falls within the circumstances specified by the board, an opportunity of personal hearing may be given. Now, therefore, who actually conducts this personal hearing? First of all, when the order does not go to a review unit, there is no clarity as to who will actually conduct the personal hearing. However, if the revenue unit, now when I was explaining the procedure, when the NFAC decides to send it to the review unit, what they will do is they can do two things. One, they can either concur with the order, or they can suggest some variations with respect to the order. Now, once they do it, and if they have suggested certain variations that has been proposed by the draft in the draft assessment order, it will be sent to the NFAC, and then the NFAC will forward it to another assessment unit other than the original assessment unit. Now, the other are AU2 for the purpose of convenience, I'll use it as AU2. The assessment unit 2 will again pass a final draft assessment order, which will be communicated to the assessee through the NFAC. The NFAC, if it finds that the final draft assessment order also has any variations that is prejudicial to the interest of the assessee, then it will send it to the assessee to receive assessee's objections. And if the assessee seeks an opportunity for personal hearing, then the assessment unit will conduct the personal hearing. Now, in the instant case, I would like to refer a decision of the Supreme Court in the case of Gullapalli Nageshwar Rao versus APSRT Corporation, wherein I'll briefly narrate the facts of the case and what was the decision in that particular case. Now, the Andhra Pradesh government wanted to take over a section of private transit, a section of public transport from the private transporters. So there were a lot of private players in the society who were actually doing the public transport system. Now, the Motor Vehicle Act was suitably amended, and the act gave powers for the government to take over the public transport system by plying its own buses in the interest of the public. Now, the Act clearly said that the government can take over only if it publishes a scheme in the official gazette, and once a scheme is published, then the person who's being affected by the scheme will be given an opportunity to raise his objections. Now, it has to be done within a period of 30 days. Once it is done within a period of 30 days, then the objections will be disposed by giving an opportunity. Now, the objections were raised and it went before the transport secretary. The transport secretary heard the affected people in person. However, once the objections were received, it was forwarded to the chief minister, who then took a decision saying that all these objections are rejected. So in this particular case, the objections were being heard by one person, whereas the decision was taken entirely by a different person. Now the Supreme Court held that it is in the annals of a fair hearing, it is imperative that one who hears is the one who has to decide. Now, in comparing the same scenario in our case, in the case of National Faceless Assessment, the hearing is conducted by the assessment unit. As far as my reading of the scheme goes, if the hearing is conducted by the assessment unit, but the decision ultimately is taken by the NFAC, which finalizes its assessment. Now the question is it not against the principle of fair hearing, where one person is hearing and another completely entire person is deciding the case? Is what my question is with respect to this issue.
See, when one person was hearing and one person was passing the orders itself, we have plethora of litigation. Now this will only give rise to, we have to spruce up our offices and, get ready for the litigation which is going to come. It's a huge problem actually. In fact, Mr. Balaji said that the DRP and this cannot be compared. I am only comparing the attitude of the officers. I am only comparing the functioning of the department. I'm not to that extent, whatever is the smallest clarification they have, it will be made into an addition, is my fear here. And my fear is also proving to be right in this matter, that, Mr. Rajaratnam used to say always that if you have a doubt, we are in the side of the revenue. So when the revenue has a doubt, it will always err against the assessee. It will always make the addition. It will always want the assessee to defend himself. That might be the situation which will come. That is my only apprehension, and that is my only apathy to say that the litigation in this faceless assessment is going to increase. And where, again, all the other forums are also faceless now. Up to tribunal, it is actually faceless. I'm not very confident about the situation right now. I think everything will come and fall into the courts, and there might be what we call a confusion in this matter is my only apprehension.
Just to add on to the point of the case law which was cited by Veeraraghavan, but there are a lot of decisions which says that the principle, that is one who hears must decide, need not be very effective when it is an institutional decision. The institution as such is a single entity. So whoever decides or whoever hears need not be the only person passing the order, because there are a lot of judgments on that line also. So how would that be helpful in this case, in this aspect? If you could summarize on this point also.
To add on what Mr. Prithvi has said, supposing an officer hears you, he did not pass an order, he is promoted, new officer come in that place, naturally he will hear you and pass an order.
Sir, under section 129, if there is a change in incumbent, then it is necessary that the new officer has to give an opportunity to the assessor.
Why not the same principle apply here?
Sir, it is a matter of judicial principle itself, sir. While we were arguing in courts before benches, if there is any reconstitution in the bench, the new bench hears the matter from the first again. It need not be a statutorily invoked law, but a judge-made law. It's a matter of principle, sir.
See, institutionally invoked judgment, Prithvi, what you are telling me is right, where it is only an interpretation of law. Assuming for a moment a very extremely hypothetical situation, where artificial intelligence is actually deciding the judgment, or the assessment is being done by an artificial intelligent agency or a system. In that case, what you say is right. It is an institutional decision. Whereas income tax, there are more facts than law in the matter. There are more facts. All of us would agree that there are nuances of facts which need to be explained. And however we make it in writing, there has to be an oral explanation, which is a normal way. I think we are trying to be rigid also. We don't know. Maybe in all fairness, the faceless assessment will be a huge success. And if I'm proved wrong, I am actually the happiest person. So what happens here is where there are more than one person involved in the interpretation of facts. Interpretation of law itself, we have issue. Where there is interpretation of facts, understanding
no certainty.
Where there are only. I had an interesting situation in the Madras High Court under Section 144. This thing wherein the officer could invoke the senior officer's judgment on it. What is that? 144A or something? I don't exactly remember. In that, what happened was, it was proved that the senior officer's instructions had to be followed by the junior officer, by the assessing officer, by which it was sent again, remanded back to the assessing officer to make an independent judgment and not take that order into account. So where, as Mr. Vishwanathan sir said, where the senior officer is also involved, whether I would take the words of the senior officer or try to go against him, which will have larger repercussions for me, is an issue to be thought of. I am skeptical. In fact, I'm only sharing skepticism. If I'm proved wrong, I'm very happy.
No. In fact, in one of my personal cases, it does not relate to income tax. It relates to Reserve Bank of India cancellation of registration.
Okay.
Where the show cause notice was issued by a person in Chennai, but then the order of cancellation was passed by an authority in Mumbai. In fact, this judgment was stated by us in before the learned single judge. But the learned single judge says that it is an institutional decision. That's why it will not stand.
Reserve Bank of India, the whole issue is different. Since I practiced Reserve Bank of India also during my earlier days, I would, take this issue with you offline and then speak. Or if we have time after the presentation, we can.
I think after the presentation we'll go on.
Yes, comparing Reserve Bank of India's decision and income tax decision on a particular assessee situation might not be identical. Or
No. I'm not comparing. I'm just coming on the concept of institutional decision.
You are only throwing issues for debate. I perfectly understand.
Prithvi,
Yes,
till slides are there, we can continue the.
I think he has one more point.
All right, go ahead.
One more issue, sir.
Yeah, one more issue. Then we can have some discussion. We can, if we can quickly go through that next issue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There are actually two more issues. I would like to take up the next issues where the powers or autonomy of the original AU gets compromised. See, there is an assessment unit which has already passed a draft assessment order. Now, by constituting a review unit within the, to review the decision that has been passed by the original assessment unit, is the assessment unit not being put under pressure? Rather, is not a futile exercise for the assessment unit to actually carry out that assessment is my next point. See, the NFAC, as I said, has the option to refer the draft assessment order to the review unit. On what basis, under what premise they can refer that draft assessment order, on what situations or on what facts and circumstances they can refer the assessment order is left to the NFAC in entirety on a plain reading of the scheme. But by constituting a review unit within the same level, I understand one argument could be that the government is trying to minimize the error that it is trying to do with respect to carrying out the assessment so that the appeal gets reduced and consequently there is no litigation and the revenue recovery is also perfect. But in trying to streamline the system, the government, by constituting another review unit, is only casting aspersions on the head of the assessment unit, because the assessment unit would know that ultimately the order that he is trying to communicate it to the NFAC will not see the light of the day. The judgment that I would like to reference in this particular slide is the case of the decision in Greenwald Corporation, wherein the assessee was a partnership firm. The partnership firm was established and they were given certain tax holidays, and they were also entitled to deductions under 80IA and 80IB. So an assessing officer wanted to review whether they are complying with the conditions that are imposed in 80IA and 80IB. A notice was issued, and consequently it was found that the assessee was actually complying with all the conditions. However, the assessment was reopened on the instructions of the commissioner, and then after reopening an assessment, another assessment order was actually passed. Now, while passing that order, the particular assessing officer recorded in his or her particular order stating that this order has been passed based on the instructions that were given by the commissioner, which means she had visited the office of the commissioner, chief commissioner personally, and in the presence of the additional commissioner, this order was actually passed, and the draft assessment order was sent to the additional commissioner for approval, and based on the phone that was received from the additional commissioner office, the order has been approved. So after many rounds of litigation, the matter ultimately reached the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said that there was no independence that was exercised by the the assessing officer in that particular case. They also highlighted the importance of the assessing officer trying to exercise his independent frame of mind in trying to conclude with respect to this particular assessment. So they said they quashed the order on that ground and stated that the autonomy of the assessing officer should not be compromised. So my contention with respect to this particular issue is that by constituting a review unit at the same level, is the NFAC not, or is the government not trying to cast aspersions on the mind of the assessment unit in trying to conclude something, especially if the assessment unit knows that within the same level, his order might get superseded. So this is one issue that I would like to raise. The last issue that I would like to raise, and it can be taken up together, is the issue of rule against bias. As Mr. Vishwanathan sir was actually saying, instead of a show cause notice, a draft assessment order is issued. Now, once a draft assessment order is issued, the draft assessment order has already got certain observations that have been made by the assessing officer. Now, once it is issued and the draft assessment order has got, proposals or suggestions that are prejudicial to the interest of the assessee, it goes to the NFAC. The NFAC redirects that distinct to the assessee, and the assessee has to raise an objection based on whatever is communicated in the draft assessment. Now the PH is also assuming that the PH is also conducted by the same assessment unit. Will the assessing officer or the assessment unit actually go back on the decision that he has already made in the draft assessment order? Will it not be against the principle of fair hearing, and will it not lead to a likelihood of bias, especially when he knows that the observations that he has made in the draft assessment order is likely to be taken back because of the submissions that are being made by the assessee? So one argument is there is a difference when it comes to a show cause notice or a draft assessment. In the show cause notice, it is only a proposal that is put forth by the assessing officer, or under the indirect tax by the relevant officer to the assessee to respond to such proposals. However, when it comes to a draft assessment order, in all likelihood, the decision is more or less made by the particular assessment unit or the assessing officer, and would it be difficult for him to go back on the decision that he has already concluded upon. So this is the last issue that I would like to throw open to this forum.
I think we can consolidate last two issues together. Veeraraghavan, are you done with the presentation?
Yeah, I just have my credit slide, which I can put it in the end after everyone finishes.
All right, yes.
To respond to what was the last point, undermining the powers of the assessing unit or assessing officer.
Yes, sir.
You see, the principles of the government is the system has gone to dogs and there is a lot of corruption.
Yes,
they
sir.
don't want to waste the power with the particular assessment officer. That is why all this faithless assessment and all that is being introduced.
Yes,
therefore, it is the business of the government whether they want to undermine somebody or give the powers to somebody. That should not be any concern to us assessee. So long as he pays tax correctly and he is given the right of representation of the tax paid by him is correct, These matters should not be, it's a policy decision according to me, subject to what other friends have to say.
Absolutely.
What,
Yes, sir.
Balaji, am I right?
We will give 15 minutes for discussion. I think there was a point to be discussed was on
Risk management strategy.
yes, the risk management.
Yeah,
So yes, sir, APS sir, I concluded abruptly when you were telling your point. I think you can continue again.
I want to support the APS here, subject to grant of opportunity to me.
Sir, you can very well start, sir. The APS sir.
The question of the risk management is something like an intelligence obtained by a department. It is the manner in which a department works itself. See, with so much of assessees, the department can have its own system to devise which area is risky, which area is not risky, to assess the tax, which is their basic function. It need not be any legality. It is the administrative work of the department, according to me. So long as there is legality in the decision making, we should not go into how they collect the information or on what basis they are scrutinizing the particular assessment. Even prior to faceless, that was the system for picking up assessment for scrutiny under 143.
But they cannot generalize. They cannot generalize. That is my apprehension.
Sir, actually,
to answer your point on this.
my submission will be like this, sir. For example, I think you would have come across about the penny stock matter, sir, where the assessees have been making a claim under section 1038 that it has been exempt from taxation. But all that are all been companies, only paper companies where paper transactions are being done. So under this guidelines by the board, they will say that all transactions relating to penny stocks can be taken up for scrutiny assessment. Like that, time to time, what the board feels that repeated evasion of tax is being there, that they will come under the risk management category, and time to time they will circulate it through the board. That is my understanding, subject to all our friends' discussions.
I'm endorsing the view of Senthil Kumar. I'm endorsing the view of Senthil Kumar. Even in the Senthil Kumar refers that is penny stock matter. Based on the CBI report from Bombay and Calcutta only, the entire assessment has been made. So these are the things are there.
So time to time depends
upon. I think. Except to the extent of saying that that's a risk. On facts, Bombay, Calcutta, etc. are, I think, deviation over the topic. But definitely, as I think Hema had put it, it is a risk management point based on which board could and board has come with. Similarly, on transfer pricing also, the board has come on various situations on risk management. And to answer your point,
if I may add to the
yes, they can. 144.
Can the risk management strategy be obtained by way of an RTA, sir? In such cases, will it be subject to the purview of RTA?
See, the risk
provided he has got a right, he is the person to get that information. If it concerns his business, that person definitely.
No, risk management is only a name given for an existing system which is being followed. It is the scrutiny. For scrutiny, we had certain rules. The following companies, the scrutiny will be taking place, and for the other assessees, it will be 5%, 10%, or whatever it is. The risk management is only something akin to that. As per when this system was introduced, when the scrutiny system was introduced some time back, I was part of a committee at that time, in which they said that the resources of the government of the assessing officers are limited. So we would like to concentrate on those areas where the revenue can get the rightful taxes which is due to them. If you see in the scrutiny, the salaried employees will not be included because almost all the salaried employees' taxes will be clear. So there is no requirement to scrutinize a salaried employee. Similarly, similarly a pensioner. There are certain issues which the department will feel wherein if it is being targeted, the revenue collection would increase or the tax evasion would be, found out and we can take up the action against that. That is the risk strategy which is being meant according to be subject to the correction of the elders. But I think it is only because of that they are trying to see which are the class of assessees, which are the class of transaction, which are the income level, class of income level, who have to be scrutinized or who have to be taken up by the faceless assessments. Not everybody. Nowadays, because of the friendliness which the department is showing, there has been a reduction in blind scrutinies. So, in order to find a strategy, that I think is the strategy which they are adopting.
In fact, let me supplement to Ramana Kumar sir. That already under 143.3 assessment, the assessment is being made based on the computer aided scrutiny assessment only.
That's what I said. That's what I
that
said.
is what the same parameter will be taken it for the purpose of this the risk management also.
Exactly. This is what I told even prior to faceless. This was there. Sir, if you compare it to indirect access, there are agencies like DRI, DGCI, and in the VAT there is an enforcement wing. These are all sources from where they get what kind of evasion is going on, and they are within the right to proceed against the assessee. That need not have any legality.
Now the reopening is also said to be based on information, not based on the reasons to believe by the assessing officer. Now, in fact, there is a new provision for 235B, BB, BC were been introduced, where companies were been required to give lot of information relating to their assessment. So these informations also is a basis for the risk management. They will have these categories for the purpose of risk management. That's what I feel about it.
However, the issue, Prithvi, I have a point.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Go on. Go ahead.
See, the issue here is that that there's no transparency. There should be a transparency from the department regarding what is risk management strategy, especially where artificial intelligence is involved. The decisions which are being made here, they have said that there's an automated examination tool, and such tools are basically governed by the artificial intelligence. It is not governed by the humans. So I feel that where even artificial intelligence is involved, there needs to be a lot of transparency to the SSC, because SSC does not know that on what basis the NFAC is going to finalize the order or pass it to the review unit or give a show cause notice.
Why should he know, Akshay? Why should he know? Why should the assessee know why it is being scrutinized? If you are correcting, if the assessee's computation of income is right, ultimately he'll get a nil return. Why should the department share the strategy with the assessees? My only issue is, if it is being shared, we know how to misuse it now. Why should the department share it? Is there any valid reason for that except telling that it is principles of natural justice? The department should share the assessment. The assessment must be fair, is what we are requesting. We are not requesting whether it is scrutinizing me or you. Why should we know the parameters, or why should the department say? Because these will be the questions which the CBDT and the government will ask if we raise it on them.
And then
Assessment should be transparent, boss.
To add on, when you give a draft assessment order, there is transparency. How do you say there is no transparency?
See, Satish sir, you are to be transparent. Satish sir, you are telling it has to be transparent. I agree. See, for example, they are going to raid somebody. So they give an advance notice. They give a press conference to say that I will be raiding ABC tomorrow. It's not transparency. No, sir. I'm just asking you this question. I'm just trying to put it, because now we have a situation where we can raise these points to the government. If we say the transparency is required for any valid reason, we can say that it needs to be transparent. Earlier, we ran a campaign to say that all the AAR information which the department is having, it should be shared in your Form 26AS. Give an opportunity to the assessee to show that in his income. Why do you want to keep the AR information secretive, and after he files the return, find that, see, you have not shown your bank interest from this bank, you have not shown, so you impose interest penalty on him. Instead of that, you share all the information to him from Form 26AS, let him file the return. Now it has been accepted by the government after we ran this campaign for about 5 to 6 years earlier. So in those matters, what you say transparency, I agree. But with respect to the system of scrutiny or with the system of raid, if we have to have a transparency, I think It is my very personal feeling that it would lead to a confusion and the intended results will not be achieved. Sir, please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm willing to be corrected.
Sir, here the question is not regarding the scrutiny. Here the question is basically this situation arises when the draft assessment order is made, and after that it is basically left upon the NFAC to decide whether to finalize the order, whether to give a show cause notice, or whether to send it to the review unit. So
what is the percentage of situations wherein the draft finalized orders was ultimately altered in the final order? I think it will be far and few in between. Every draft assessment order will be finalized because, as Balaji said, both draft order and the final order is only one system. It is only the approval for only for the sake of approval. It is going there. The draft order itself must be fair is my issue here. Whether the draft assessment order itself is fair is an issue here. Is there any situation, sir, anyone with your experience, can you say that the draft order was altered, a few additions were dropped in the final order? I don't think so.
Very limited, sir. Very limited.
I don't think so. A few and
No, sir.
Raghavan, one question to you.
Yes, sir.
Out of these topics and everything, there is a section called 144A. A joint commissioner gives a direction to the assessing authority.
Yes, sir.
How it is dealt in the faceless assessment? Have you come across anything on those subjects?
I'm afraid that I haven't come across anything like that.
Sir, if I may, sir, every order has a 144A embedded in it. Draft assessment order is prepared by one officer. It is finalized by another officer.
Ramana Kumar, my precise question is that in 144A, a joint commissioner gives a direction to the assessing authority. There are three situations where he can be taken as suo motu. The second is by the application by an assessing authority. The third is by the application by the assessee itself. How it is dealt in the faceless assessment. This is one of the glitches, which is an issue which is going on in everywhere.
Yes.
In fact, one other issue which I want to address for B. Raghavan is that he said there is an assessment unit and a review unit. In fact, you yourself stated that to reduce the errors in the assessment order, the review unit is there. This is how we.
No, sir. As far as the plain language of the act goes, discretion is given to the NFAC to send it to the review unit. But I'm not sure whether every order will be sent or only a select few orders will be sent.
It may be.
If there is a time constraint, the draft assessment order will be finalized.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. It's a policy decision that if order may not go there, some order may go, some order may not go. That's a different issue for this.
What happened to the power of review and revision?
No, that's why RFAC is not, even if you say that when the commissioner is there, there will not be 263 under faceless. Will you say like that? You can't come to such a conclusions.
But you must tell us how they are going to do it.
263 is not possible in faceless. We cannot come to such conclusions, is my
end of the day, I think this is
how will it work?
Sir, I think that
No,
how
sir,
will
at
it work?
present
We
it
will
is
come
very
to know
broad,
eventually. It is still in a
It's
growing
a trial and
phase.
error only.
It is there
It's
are
only
a
trial
lot
and
of
error.
glitches which could be answered.
In fact, actually,
eventually in a lot of litigation.
The topic is that first time a webinar on faceless assessment is taken by absolutely kudos to Mr. V. Raghavan. Seriously.
Yes, sir.
Thank
In
you, sir.
fact, on
Standing
this
ovation should
issue,
be given by each and every person.
Excellent presentation.
There is
in fact,
national
presentation.
based assessment
Absolutely
center
excellent
and
presentation.
assessing officer.
just to add on here, in fact, there was a very good article written by Hemalata madam on this faceless assessment. I would request ma'am to again share that article.
Salient points of
The article can be shared again, and what all are the other aspects what we have discussed now. I request Ms. Yamalada to written an article again on this.
Sure,
What are the
sure,
areas
definitely.
left out,
On the
or
glitches,
can it be a
how to
part
overcome
two also? Especially
This
we
is
were
not a teething
asking the
problem.
other.
This has to be rectified in future. Actually,
Yes,
so.
probably the standing council can clarify the position better.
Yes, I think all the standing councils should come and answer all the.
I think we all of us can join, like a open discussion. We can
Yes,
have.
yes,
This,
definitely.
what I want to say is, this faceless assessment has gone into root and structure of the law itself. It has unsettled the settled position of law, so it has to be looked into properly.
Sir, Mr. Senthil Kumar,
Balaji, sir.
Mr. Senthil Kumar has rightly put in the chat box that how is the High Court virtual hearing by trial and error, it is getting improved. I have got absolutely no qualms in telling that if the assessment is through VC, wherein our views, the assessee's views, the assessee's representative views are being accepted, there is absolutely no problem. Now everything is only in a written format. Assume a situation where I have to argue over it only by written submissions. First of all, the authority must be able to read it fully. It is not physically possible. It is not physically possible to read, and where there are issues of accountancy involved, where there are issues of finance involved, the authority has to be explained. That is the role of the authorized representative, isn't it not, sir? So I think in a faceless assessment, that is lacking. And I don't expect the authorities. In fact, it is actually humanly impossible for anybody to read 50 pages or 60 pages of submission, see all this thing. So there will be certain glitches. Of course, if we are able to learn from that, it is great. But I have my apprehensions because of the DRP experience. There has been an earlier experience similarly to this. And again, the same thing is being brought in a different format for a different forum. Is my only apprehension. I'm not.
In 1994, if I recall, there was a budget by Mr. Manmohan Singh where the powers of the excise officers were removed. Totally self-assessment, everything was given to the assessee. There was hue and cry with the authorities because they lost their power. They went on issuing show cause notice after show cause notice for everything. Like that here also the power of assessment being taken away, something like that will have to happen and it will have to settle. That is my view.
Vishwanathan sir, swanta kadaya.
Ama.
In fact, I think like whoever tries to take or misuse the process and just take a lot of time in completing all these process might probably come to an end with this scheme, is what I understand. Obviously, there are going to be glitches. In fact, personally also, like I have seen 2 cases where the assessment have been passed, like one of the auditors of ours has done it. So those, I mean, it was never expected to be done so soon, but it has happened. But naturally, yes, there are issues which are pertaining to personal hearing and other natural justice point of view, which will definitely come before various courts. And I am sure that there will be some route paved for coming to a more proper and better faceless assessment.
My only concern is if the honest taxpayer is protected without hassles, then
It will
is
be,
fine.
sir. Let us hope for the
They
best.
should also not be put to problem. By
The
this.
heading is honor the
No, but-
honest. Honor the honest.
Honor the honest.
Honor the honest.
No, but we have brilliant minds who can work in any
Lot
way.
of litigations have been coming up now,
Yes, yes.
both for the assessee as well as for the departments.
Because we can't be talking about the hassles only. We have to think in terms of the progress of the
Yes,
tax collection.
definitely,
also.
definitely.
So
It
all
always
of you
goes
be
both
happy.
ways.
So all of you be happy.
Yes.
So we
Very
no,
much.
we need to improve our drafting skills more than arguing skills.
Satish, I am on your side. I am not an IT practitioner.
Sir, you can start, sir. Okay, anyways, thank you for this another very interesting topic and a very debatable topic.
And I must also compliment Veeraraghavan. You have done a very good
Veeraraghavan.
job.
Yes,
It's
sir.
a very
Thank you.
interesting subject. You have brought it very nicely also to our knowledge. Thank you very much.
Sir,
Well
before
done,
I,
well done, well done.
வீரராகவன் இது வரைக்கும் எந்த சீனியர் இது வரைக்கும் இந்த டாபிக் எடுத்தது இல்ல. In fact, we are so proud to have you here. Absolutely.
thank you, thank you.
Seriously, இது வரைக்கும் no one has taken this. ஏன்னா அவனுக்கு முதல்ல facelessனா என்னன்னே புரியணுமே, அதுக்கப்புறம் தான் எடுக்கணும்.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful.
Veeraraghavan, you can be proud. You are getting it from the horse's mouth.
Yes, sir. Sir, I
It's a
think
newborn baby.
Exaggeration or any other thing. In the start of this, I spoke to Mr. A.P. Srinivas. how Veer Raghavan was so bold to take a topic on faceless assessment.
Yes,
Seriously, sir.
absolutely.
And he was also
fact,
very
this topic-
intelligent to put the question to the August body and start a deliberation.
So he has got all of us working also, all our seniors,
Yes, well done,
all
well
the
done.
councils from the
Good job.
department.
Thank you,
So it was a very good
Well
session.
done, well
So
done.
I
Good job,
think
sir. Veer Raghavan.
before I would like to conclude, I'll just share the credit slide.
Sure.
Yes, yes, please.
I think I would like to credit my senior, Mr. K. Sengoton, who was also here in this meeting. And I had a team working with me where I had prepared various slides. They had helped me technically as well in preparing the PPT. These are the advocates. Some of them had already earlier presented here. RSC, Ponmandar, Jitendra, Abhishek, Akshay, Renuka, Durga, and Chitija. All of them, most of them are presented here. So it's not my individual work alone. I think a lot of them have helped me in trying to bring this out with flying colors. Thank you so much, everyone. I would like to
We
thank
must congratulate Sengotovan sir for
The entire
for
team.
such brilliant sessions which we've been having of late. So whoever is remaining of this list must come up with the upcoming webinars also. That would be our request. So thank you once again. Balaji
Thank you,
sir, you
Balaji.
wanted to say something?
Thank you and your team.
No, I said the entire team.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So thank you
Veer
very much.
Raghavan did
once
very
again.
well.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to thank MTB for giving me an opportunity and a constant source of encouragement. To encourage some youngster like me with your level of experience and knowledge is something I'm truly blessed about. Thank you
In
so much.
fact, to be honest, you are putting us into a complex situation.
Also, you may see whether 246A correspondingly requires an amendment.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Exactly.
Because
Yeah,
the
homework
person who
to you.
passes the assessment order.
Exactly,
Something let
Balaji.
us leave for part
Balaji,
two.
Balaji is giving you a homework now.
Yes,
Soon
Yes.
we will have part
We-
two. sir.
Part 2 by all the standing
No.
councils of
So not just homework for Veer Raghavan. I think for Hemalata also for conceiving it.
Yamalada is only going to lead to.
150th seminar by Hemalata only.
Yes. That's also correct.
Thank you very much all
Thank
for
you,
joining
thank you
us.
very much.
We will be uploading the session on YouTube. So once the session is uploaded, we will share the link. Thank you very much. Tomorrow morning, 11 o'clock, we have another very interesting talk by Vaidishwaran sir on the recent judgment on the Hindu religious temples.
Heritage.
Yes, heritage. So thank you once again. We will share the link for tomorrow shortly. I'm closing the session.
Thank you.